Greetings and welcome back to the show, World War II Books Where to Start. I'm your host, Admiral Darlan, hanging out in Casablanca, waiting for Eisenhower to come to his senses and make me the Supreme Commander. In the meantime, let's talk about the Mediterranean, right, as a general theater of war. I really have not explored the Mediterranean on this channel yet, so here's an opportune moment to do so. A classic sideshow. Some say it's crucial, some say it's just that, a sideshow. Some say it could have ended the war successfully for the Axis if they had just opened their eyes and realized the opportunities there. So let's explore this deep and mysterious subject, shall we? First up, Naval War in the Mediterranean, 40 to 43 by Jack Green and Alessandro Massiani. From 2002 originally, republished in 2012 or so. It's kind of brief, 314 pages main body. However, that 314 pages may take you a long time to get through. Now, notice that cover. The Naval War in the Mediterranean. And what do we have on the cover? We have an aircraft dropping a torpedo. A couple of them. At least if they are Italian torpedo bombers, right? They got that right. But why would you not put a photo or a drawing, illustration of an Italian battleship on here? Why? I don't get it. Poor choices already. Now here's the fascinating stuff. There's a lot of small-scale engagements all over the Med from 40 to 43. Destroyers here, some trawlers there, small-scale convoys. The Italians ran a lot of tiny convoys, 2 to 4 ships, with maybe sometimes just one destroyer as escort at times because of their fuel situation. But that's primarily because of the unloading capacity in the ports at Tripoli and Benghazi. Very small dock facilities. And the infrastructure was never expanded. The Italian military forces just didn't have the ability to do it, or didn't realize it was a priority, that logistics was going to win or lose a thing for them. They just didn't get it. So there's a lot of small-scale actions. And the Vichy Navy comes in and out at rare, weird moments to do things. Sometimes they're fighting the British Navy. Sometimes they're bombing Gibraltar. And that's a ballsy move, right? But they did it a couple times. Sometimes they're sneaking big convoys past Gibraltar, daring the British to attack to make a big diplomatic incident. And the British, British are like, well, are we really at war with them or are we not? It's kind of those undeclared, declared wars that sometimes we sink a Vichy ship and sometimes we let it go. Some really bizarre stuff here for the small scale engagements and little ship actions you never heard of. They do start off with a background to the Mediterranean in the post-World War I years and some of the diplomatic stuff going on, which was real absolute virgin territory for me. I had no idea this stuff was going on. And the revolving political situation. Who do we ally with in the Med? Do we want to be with the French? Do we want to ally with the Italians? Do we trust Germany to do its thing? How do we, the circles of power whirling about each other, how do we settle down and figure out who's on what side and what are we trying to get out of the Mediterranean? The British had it crystal clear. We keep our trade routes open. That was their primary mission. That was the only thing they were interested in. We keep Egypt, we keep the Suez, and we keep the product flowing. Everybody else had really conflicting notions of what they wanted to do. So that setup chapter is pretty cool because it's such new material and such kind of an atypical background chapter that won't put you to sleep. However, some of the writing will put you to sleep. This was strictly a chapter-by-chapter affair. It took me a couple, 3 months to summon enough energy to get through it. The writing is kind of dull, kind of very dull. So they just don't know how to escalate to this is really important moment and how to get through some of the duller passages of the war. It's all kind of monotone telling. So it's a struggle. But for material on the general war in the early stages, before the U.S. gets involved, it's fantastic. This was just a chance discovery in a half-price book, so no regrets there. And it's from Naval Institute Press. I think that's probably the most disappointing aspect when I just mentioned the cover art, that NIP would print this, and this is the reprint, and then allow this cover art to pass, as well as the really awful photo section. There's not a single photo of an Italian Navy officer in that photo section. There's a single picture of a single British officer, Cunningham. That's it. Nobody else. None of the little guys that had heroic moments. None of the big guys. Not even like Hitler and Mussolini standing on the balcony together. He didn't even put that in there. So the photo section is real mishmash. Somebody at the editing house said, "Oh, we got to get a few pictures in here. Let's put some boats in there. It'll do." And then send it to the press. Total non-effort for this, and perhaps reflecting their thoughts on the market possibilities of this book. So from that aspect, very disappointing. The material is fine if you can plow through it. Also, I have to do this. The typeset is awful. Just a demonstration. It's teeny tiny and it's fuzzy. It's not a clear printing. So there's a lot going against this book, and yet I'm still going to give 3 stars because of the material is, kind of from an unexplored or underexplored section of the war. So that's Jack Green and Alessandro Massiani kind of making a mess of it, but kind of half of it not their fault. That's NIP. That's their issue. The Nibble War and the Med. All right, next up, Crete, 41, The Battle and Resistance, Anthony Beevor. This was from 91, one of his earlier books, 384 pages, main body. One of his real early ones. I think he'd already done the Civil War in Spain thing, because he references the Civil War in Spain several times in here. I think he was just kind of doing flashbacks. This has a new intro to it, and the updated, it's an updated edition. I don't know if there's expanded material in here. I can't quite remember. So Crete, again, something I knew nothing about. Somebody on the channel in the comment section asked me, "Hey, you got anything on Crete? Have you read this book?" And I was like, "No, but, I'll put it on the short list, and we'll get to it." So it's Beevor. I love Beevor for the most part, and he doesn't let you down here. I was kind of worried this was going to bog down into the resistance section and be very dull for 300 pages to finish the book. But it's not. Now, the early chapters are a bit of a fumble. We've got the early stuff with the Greek campaign and the Italian bungling in Greece and Albania, the Hitler rescue of the situation, and driving the Brits off the continent again, another Dunkirk. That's fumbled a bit because he's got all these weird characters running around there you don't expect to be there, and it's really kind of amateur hour diplomatic spy stuff. You've got Anthony Eden running around in there doing some Machiavellian-ish attempted stuff behind the scenes, and some other people that name recognition. Like what are we doing here? Why are we talking about this? So the opening section can be a bit of a bumble and a jumble, but once we actually get to the prep for the invasion of Crete, it smooths out. Now, I would say again, I don't think he handles the German paratrooper drop exceptionally well. It should be the centerpiece, and it's not. He should really have bore down on that militarily, and I don't think maybe he wasn't just that adept at military writing at this point to do divisions and battalions and companies, because a lot of this is small scale drops because of scattering of the forces. Paratrooper actions are messy by default because it hardly ever goes to plan. People are spread all over. Crucial commanders are killed. You got the improper allocation of how many aircraft they need, reserves of aircraft, and then the terror on the first night of the Germans. Do we reinforce or do we bail? Because we've got one toehold at an airport, at an airfield, and we need that. Do we reinforce failure and hope, or do we call it quits and admit to our first military defeat in the war? So they carried through with it and got lucky, primarily because of Freiburg, who was discussed at length as being a well-meaning commander, very brave, having suffered 14 wounds in the First War of the VC and all that. One of Churchill's early war favorites, and just not up to the task. Perhaps a little tired from the Greece campaign, perhaps a little bit overwhelmed by the idea of how do I defend an island. He was obsessed by the idea of a seaborne landing versus aerial assault, reflecting his Great War experience. Just couldn't wrap his head around the fact that it couldn't come in from the air too, and the Germans have the capability. Maybe the intel wasn't quite up there for him, but the ultra messages that Beevor has dug up to throw in here does indicate that that London was telling him his primary worry should be an aerial assault. So again, it's really on Freiburg, I think, and his staff to have bungled this, when they had 3 months prep time before the Germans got their act together to make the decision. And Kurt Student had to talk Hitler into it. Hitler wasn't married to it. And Bevo kind of points out here that stuff that Hitler wasn't married to, as far as an operational plan, he was very objective and correct about his predictions for chances of success and what was going to happen. And here he said it's going to be a bloodbath, and you're going to wreck your division. I'm not loving this, but he did in the end get talked around into it. Conversely, the stuff he was married to, Barbarossa and Barbarossa and beyond, he was almost always wrong about. So that's kind of an astute point to put out there by Beevor. Kind of like that. Orange Leonard was a code name the Brits used at this time for distributing Ultra intelligence. It was their code name for Ultra. Orange Leonard. I like that. It's kind of weird. So the dispatches, if you hunt them down in the notes for sources, they all have OL or Orange Leonard denoted as this is an ultra missive. Kind of cool little thing I don't think I've ever seen before. And I think it's just specific to the Med that they use that code name for that particular time and that particular place. So pretty cool. Evelyn Waugh is mentioned over and over because he was there on Crete and wrote a novel after the war about Crete, Officer and Gentleman. I'll hunt that down someday and try to read that one. Kind of interesting. There's a couple snarky comments the rank of file the squatties had for the RAF. One I remember is rare as fairies, because if you're an infantryman, you're always going to bitch about the lack of air support, unless it's going to do the job for you. You're always going to bitch about it. Rare as fairies. I like it. There's also something scrawled in a ship's hold about mocking Churchill's speech. Never in the history of humanity have so many been buggered about by so few for so little reason. I love that one. So we got a lot here just in the military stuff, the actual assault and the defense and the capitulation. And then, of course, we got the occupation and resistance. Now, here's where I thought it was going to fall apart and really slam the door on me and put me to sleep, but it didn't. We get some details about culture and society and the religious aspect, as well as German reprisals for resistance and how, of course, nasty that could be. Some deportations. The Italians get a section of the island to police and occupy because Hitler felt like, well, I got to give him a piece of the pie for just for friendly reasons to make him look good, save face in the theater, right? Even though this was a German enterprise. Later on, it became necessary as Germans drained troops away for other theaters and then to increase the Italian garrison. So that's kind of an interesting sidelight. Crete did not starve. They were hungry at some points, but they did not suffer a famine despite being an island and despite the Germans' unwillingness to really throw in food supplies. Crete was bountiful enough agriculturally to sustain themselves. So that's kind of a surprise. I was expecting a famine that I hadn't heard about before. Didn't happen. And late war, there's a kidnapping by SAS of a German general that induced some major reprisals and some whoopsies. There's also some nasty resistance killings of Germans. There's one section where the resistance caught some Germans out in the open patrolling, captured them, beat them up for a little bit in a hut, and then dragged them to a cliff and threw them over into just a pit. It's like a George Lucas bottomless pit kind of thing, just over the cliff, a couple 100 feet down, smash yourself. And the one guy said, I'll do it myself. Don't throw me in. I'll do it myself. And he crawls to he didn't want to, because they were breaking their arms and legs before they threw him. Don't do that to me. I'll do it myself. I'll take care of it. And that he did. That's really hardcore stuff there. I got through it fairly easily. That's Crete 41, Anthony Beevor, an early Beevor, and a pretty good stuff covering something that's famous for a film clip and documentaries, and that's about all it's ever said about Crete. So yeah, it's pretty good stuff and kind of a crucial find. Crete 41. All right, then, moving on to third one today, An Army at Dawn by Rick Atkinson from 2002, 541 pages, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. I first ran across this in a story about George W. Bush's summer reading list. He was plowing through this, and I thought at the time, that's really odd for a president to be reading something about World War II, even though I knew his father was in it, but I thought, man, that's kind of deep topic for a U.S. president. It kind of intrigued me. Kept, kind of put a check mark in my mind. Put a check mark in my mind there, and years later I investigated, and I'm happy to report this is fantastic. His whole Liberation trilogy is 5-star, and I'm hard pressed to pick a winner out of the 3 which one was the best, although I would lean towards the middle volume, even though I have often said I'm a big fan of Initial Conditions. And what initial conditions we have here. So he's not covering the British effort at Alamein or any of that, or anything involving Tripoli or Benghazi. No. We're just going with the American landings from Operation Torch right from the get-go. There's no build-up. There's no long intro. Bang, you're right in it. Then follows the trials and tribulations of the American Expeditionary Force, or whatever you want to call it, along with the Brits and their attempt to sway Vichy France to come over to the good guys, and then move on to be a great Allied cause. And we're going to liberate the entire North African coast from Axis oppression. It takes a while, of course, because Americans are new to this game. They're raw, and the Germans have a few hard lessons to deal out to them, along with the falling out and the falling in of various commanders that are not up to snuff. You're going to have that when you first put a raw army into war. A lot of commanders are going to get axed, and more competent people put in their place, trying to fit the jigsaw puzzle together. The political stuff, because the Brits don't want an American in charge. They know it's reality. They don't want in charge, but they fight throughout the book to have more Monty and less Ike. You've got the Vichy France aspect with Admiral Darlan and Giraud and another guy, I can't remember his name, that wanted command of the Allied forces. For some reason, they thought they were there to take charge once the Western Allies landed. I never did understand that kind of dreamland arrogance. You've got de Gaulle popping in. You've got the, I guess, over-sentimentalized meeting between Churchill and Roosevelt, and the Churchill taking up FDR up the tower to view the Atlas Mountains at sunset, and it's kind of the high point of the relationship. That's kind of sensationalized in a Hollywood glowing moment kind of style. And these are the best pals, best buds. They're there to free the oppressed world. Of course, the reality is far more complex, and maybe Atkinson simplifies that a wee bit for a sensational moment, just a teardrop in the eye kind of thing, maybe. But then you've got also Patton arriving and his impact on the issue, and Terry Allen. If there's a star in a book, I'd say it's General Terry Allen of the Big Red One, World War I fame, shot in the face. He's got that permanent scar where the bullet wound went in, and the infamous story that. This was the first place I read it. I've read it a couple times since then, of Patton not liking slit trenches because they were defensive minded. You don't run from air attack. So he takes upon Terry Allen to show what a real man does. He pisses in Terry Allen's slit trench. That's a classic crazy Patton moment. That is a jaw dropper, right? It's just a showstopper. What is wrong with this guy? And all the general officers and colonels standing around have to just stand at attention and not say a word, and hold their tongues and their minds. That must have been extremely difficult. What is wrong with this guy over here? What did he just do? That's Army life, right? That's a prime example of shit rolls downhill. Man, it couldn't have been easy. And then there's Lloyd Friedenhall and his shenanigans. And he builds this kind of super redoubt underground bunker system where he kind of hides away from the situation and builds his own private empire. Kind of goes Kaflooey, right? And it's kind of rare to see an American commander just go to pieces like this, and has to be relieved eventually by Eisenhower and sent on home. See you later, pal. Thanks for your service. Didn't do us any good. So there's a lot going on here, and told extremely well. Rick Atkinson's another one of the guys, got easy flow and great presentation. He's got a way with the massive amount of information he has to deal with to present to you very smoothly, very easily, and fully deserving, in my opinion, of the Pulitzer Prize. Of course, Monty does come in with the cavalry at the end of the day to help with the reduction of Tunis, and then the surrender at Tunisgrad, where the Axis lost 300 to 350,000 troops. Into the bag they go, depriving Hitler of really vital and necessary manpower, along with the equipment. They poured a bunch of Tiger tanks in there and other armor, all the artillery, the aircraft they were using to try to get some men out. A lot were shot down over the Med. There's an infamous shot of the Ju-52s just being swarmed by American fighters as they're trying to get troops out of Tunis. So there's a lot to absorb here. and I think it's fascinating. And at some point, I'll probably do a video just on the Liberation Trilogy in its entirety. But for right now, Army at Dawn is, you got to read these front to back, I think, unless you're extremely jaded and ultimately familiar with Europe. You feel like I'll just go for the third one, but I think that's, for a survey trilogy, it's probably the best one I've ever read. So that'll do it today for the Mediterranean. First dive into that situation. Hope you found one of these books you like, or maybe two. And come on back next time for another topic, another presentation. And until then, I am Admiral Darlon. Man, I can't wait to take over the forces of the Allies and show them how we liberate France for real. Until next time, happy reading.